Hello friends, today I will discuss some of the important Constitutional Amendment Act. So let's begin the session. First, Constitutional Amendment Act 1951. What is the objective of this Amendment Act? To overcome the judicial ruling and safeguard land reform law. Okay. And the key provision, what are the key provision? Article 31A and 31B were added. Why it is added? To protect agrarian reforms and introduce the 9th schedule and imposed a reasonable restriction on freedom under Article 19. Then what is the impact of this first Constitutional Amendment Act? It strengthened the power of a parliament to enact socio-economic reform and restrict certain rights when necessary. Okay, then next, 7th Constitutional Amendment Act 1956. What is the objective of this Amendment Act? Reorganization of state on linguistic basis. What are the key provision of this amendment? Abolished Part A, B, C, D state. Our state were categorized in A, B, C, D. This system was abolished by 7th Constitutional Amendment Act. Then introduce union territory. Here by abolishing this, introduced union territory. Then facilitate state reorganization commission recommendation. Facilitate state reorganization commission. That is, after this, like Eskadhar commission, Faisal Ali commission came into light. What was the impact? Paved the way for more cohesive linguistic federal structure. So next, our 10th Amendment Act, 10th Constitutional Amendment Act 1961. What is the objective of this 10th Constitutional Amendment Act? Its objective is to incorporation of Dadar and Nagar Haveli. Okay. Key provision: amended the first schedule to include Dadar and Nagar Haveli as a union territory. Then what was the impact? Integrated the former Portuguese territory into Indian Union. Then 12th Constitutional Amendment Act 1961. What is the objective? Integration of Goa and Daman and Diu. Okay, and what are the provision? Provision was amend the first schedule to add Goa, Daman and Diu as union territory. What was the impact? Cemented Indian sovereignty after the liberation from Portuguese rule. Then next, 13th Constitutional Amendment Act 1962. Objective of this amendment was special provision for Nagaland. What are the key provision? Added Article 371A. Why it is added? To preserve local custom, religion and law. And what was the impact? Addressed insurgency and respected tribal autonomy. Then 21st Constitutional Amendment Act 1967. What was the objective? Recognize Sindhi as an official language. Sindhi was recognized as official language by 21st Amendment Act. What was the provision? Included Sindhi in the 8th schedule. Included Sindhi in the 8th schedule. What was the impact? Cultural recognition of Sindhi speaking population. The next 24th Constitutional Amendment Act. What was the objective? Restore Parliament's power to amend any part of the Constitution. Restore Parliament's power to amend any part of the Constitution. What were the key provision? Amended Article 13 and Article 368. Next, asserted that Parliament can amend fundamental right. What was the impact? Overturned Golaknath verdict. Golaknath verdict was overturned and reaffirmed Parliament's supremacy was reaffirmed. Then come the 31st Constitutional Amendment Act 1973. What was the objective? Increase Lok Sabha, to increase the Lok Sabha strength. What were the key provision? Increased seat from 525 to 545 based on a population growth. What was the impact? Improved representation in the parliament. Okay, then come the 36th Constitutional Amendment Act 1975. What is the objective of the 36th Constitutional Amendment Act? Objective was make Sikkim the 22nd state of India. Okay, what were the key provision? Added Article 371F and granted full statehood to Sikkim. What was the impact? Peaceful and strategic incorporation of a border territory. Then come the most important 42 Constitutional Amendment Act 1976. It is also called a mini constitution. What was the objective? Strengthen central authority during emergency. What were the key provision? Added socialist, secular and integrity to the preamble. Then second provision, made DPSP superior to the fundamental right. That is added Article 31C. Introduce fundamental duties under Article 51A. The next, limited power of the judiciary and state. What was the impact? Drastically altered constitution, faced backlash for authoritarian tilt. This was the impact. Then come the 44 Constitutional Amendment Act. What was the objective of the 44 Constitutional Amendment Act 1978? Objective was to restore democratic value post emergency. Restore the democratic values. What are the key provision? Removed right to property from fundamental right. Right to property was removed from fundamental right and made it a legal right. Okay. Safeguard civil liberty by ensuring emergency can be declared only on cabinet written advice. Safeguard civil liberty by ensuring emergency can be declared only on cabinet written advice. Emergency can be declared on the cabinet written advice only. What was the impact? Corrected many excesses of the 42 Constitutional Amendment Act. Next come the 52 Constitutional Amendment Act 1985. What is this? That is anti-defection law. Curb politician defection. Curb the politician defection. What were the key provision? By 52 Constitutional Amendment Act, 10th schedule was added. Next provision, disqualify legislator who defect from their parties or vote against the party's direction. Then next, decision authority given to chairman, speaker, chairman. What was the impact? Ensured stability in legislature. Ensured stability in legislature. Criticized for giving excess power to speaker. Then 61st Constitutional Amendment Act 1989. What is the objective? To empower the youth. What was the key provision? What was the key provision? Lowered voting age from 21 to 18 under Article 326. It lowered the voting age. Previously it was 21 years. Now it became 18 years by 61st Constitutional Amendment Act 1989. Then come the 69th Constitutional Amendment Act 1991. What was the objective? Grant special status to Delhi. What are the key provision? Created NCT of Delhi, National Capital Territory of Delhi. Another provision, added Article 239 AA, that is Legislative Assembly and Council of Minister for Delhi. What was the impact? Provided partial statehood to Delhi. Then 71st Constitutional Amendment Act. What was the objective? Added more language. Added more language. what are the key provision? Included Konkani, Manipuri and Nepali in the 8th schedule. Konkani, Manipuri and Nepali in the 8th schedule. What was the impact? Cultural recognition and linguistic inclusivity. Then come the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act 1992, that is Panchayati Raj. What was the objective? Strengthen the local self-governance in rural area. Strengthen the local self-governance in rural area. What were the key provision? Added Part 9 and Articles 243 to 243O. Three-tier Panchayati Raj system was introduced. Then reservation for SC, ST and women, State Finance Commission and State Election Commission was created. What was the impact? Democratic decentralization at the village level. Democratic decentralization at the village level. After 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act, then come the 74th Constitutional Amendment Act 1992. It is for urban local body. What was the objective? Strengthen urban governance. To strengthen the urban governance. What were the key provision? Added Part 9A, that is Article 243P to Article 243ZG. Introduced municipalities, municipal council and corporation. What was the impact? Constitutional backing for urban development and citizen participation. Then next, our 86th Constitutional Amendment Act 2002. What was the objective? Make education a fundamental right. What were the key provision? Added Article 21A, free and compulsory education for children between 6 to 14. Modified Article 45 and added Article 51A(k). Impact: major reform for universal elementary education. Then come our next amendment, 92 Constitutional Amendment Act 2003. What was the objective of this? Promote linguistic diversity. Promote linguistic diversity. What were the key provision? Added Bodo, Dogri, Maithili, Santali to the 8th schedule. These were the language added by 92 Constitutional Amendment Act. What was the impact? Increased official language to 22. Or official language increased to 22. Then 101 Constitutional Amendment Act 2016. What is that? GST reform. What was the objective? Simple indirect taxation. What were the key provision? Introduced goods and service tax, created GST council. In Article 279, in 279A was added, subsumed multiple taxes into one. Impact: major tax reform, one nation, one tax. 102 Constitutional Amendment Act 2018. What was the objective? Empower National Commission for Backward Classes. National Commission for Backward Classes. What were the key provision of this? Added Article 338B, that is constitutional status to National Commission for Backward Class. Article 324A, specify backward class at the national level. What was the impact? Strengthen backward class representation and welfare. It strengthen the backward class representation and welfare. 103 Constitutional Amendment Act. What was 103 Constitutional Amendment Act? Provide reservation to EWS, that is economically weaker section. What were the key provision? Amended the Article 15 and 16. 10% reservation in education and job for EWS not covered under SC, ST and OBC. What was the impact? Introduced economic criterion in reservation policy. 106 Constitutional Amendment Act 2023, Women Reservation Bill. What was the objective? Reserve seat for women in legislature. What were the key provision? Added Article 330A and 332A. What is the next provision? 33% reservation for women in Lok Sabha and State Assembly, to be implemented after the next session and delimitation. What was the impact? Landmark step for gender equality in politics. Here we completed important Constitutional Amendment Act. Please like the video and subscribe the channel. Thank you.